and of course parents, but also on behavior in general, but also on crime. But also we want to see how these programs respond to some of the needs that exist in a school, and how the school liaison officer program is uniquely positioned to address these needs, probably in comparison to some other options. But before we delve into the actual conversation, I would like to share a line acknowledgement. As a newcomer and an uninvited settler, I am thankful to live, work, and play and pray on the ancestral, traditional, and unceded territory of the Solo Nation, which locally includes the Sumas and the Matsui peoples. I am thankful for the land and its resources in building our economy and sustaining our present communities. For example, Canada ranks high in the global production of 60 different minerals and metals, generating over 81 billion annually. Canada is also the third hydropower producing country after China and Brazil. However, exploiting the land and its resources alienates Indigenous communities economically and culturally. For example, some Indigenous people's homes had to be bulldozed to make way for hydroelectricity projects. Also, sexual assaults are at times carried out by workers in the resource development sector against Indigenous women. This is just an example among many, many other issues, including ecological destruction. So when we do the land acknowledgement, personally, I'm equally celebrating the progress that we are collectively making towards good stewardship and pointing out some of the shortcomings that need to be addressed. Back to our panel event. This event is co-organized and is going to be co-facilitated by Archway / the Fraser Valley Human Dignity Coalition, in partnership with Abbotsford Restorative Justice and Advocacy Association, also known as ARJA. We hope this is an opportunity to collaborate with ARJA on this event, and we hope this would catalyze future collaboration. I know also I'm throwing around names of organizations that you might not necessarily be familiar with. And I want to invite two individuals from the planning committee to just share a bit of a description about these two organizations. So first, I'm going to invite Robin to just tell us a little bit about the work of the Fraser Valley Human Dignity Coalition. And then after that, she will pass it to Amy to also tell us the work of Abbotsford Restorative Justice and Advocacy Association. I will hand it over to you, Robin.
Yeah, thanks, Muhi. My name is Robin Garland. I am the project designer within the diversity education program at Archway Community Services. And one of the things that we do is run the Fraser Valley Human Dignity Coalition, which is a group of organizations and community groups and individuals who work to address, sorry, I'm also letting people into the lobby. We work to address racism and hate in the community. We support victims of hate and bigotry, and we advance community partnerships and foster community engagement through events like this one that you're attending. I'll put a link in the comments if you're interested in joining the coalition. We're a pretty neat group of people that get together and meet, and I'll also put a link in if you want to just join our newsletter and just hear about the upcoming events that we have. We try really hard to advocate for equity, justice, and inclusion for all. So I'll pass it to Amy for ARJA.
Thanks, Robin. Yeah, thanks for being here, everyone. It's good to see such a great turnout for a really important conversation. So yeah, my name's Amy Chason. I work at Abbotsford Restorative Justice. And for those of you who don't know us, we're a nonprofit organization here in Abbotsford that provides a variety of different services to the community. Across our many programs, we strive to provide opportunities for folks in conflict situations whatever that may mean, to repair harm, to restore relationships, to rebuild trust, and to work towards transforming their communities. So one of our most vibrant programs is in partnership with the Abbotsford School District, where we facilitate mediation between students in conflict and also provide social emotional learning opportunities for students, mostly in middle schools, some elementary and some high school as well. So in this work, we often cross paths with our community school liaison officers. So this topic is important to us. And yeah, we're really pleased to be here co-hosting this conversation with Archway Diversity, and hope that this will be an insightful evening for all of us.
Thank you so much, Amy and Robin. So the way the panel discussion is going to begin, I think we are going to introduce one panelist at a time. And in total, we have 3 panelists, but we'll just introduce them one at a time. And the reason is we just want us to be able to make a connection between the person making the remarks and the remarks themselves, because identity and proximity to the subject matter actually matter. So, but before I introduce the first speaker, I just want to share something in brief. So for the first of all, Human Dignity Coalition, we do have a specific criteria for choosing an event. But the most important one is that the selected issue must have like some local relevance. But also we know that when we have this requirement of local relevance, it also limits the conversation. And we understand this is a structural limitation, because we want to address issues that are just of local concerns. That means sometimes if you have questions that are national or regional or global in nature, by design, panelists might not necessarily be equipped with the right experience to answer those questions. So we hope today we will try to stay as local and close to the topic locally as possible. Also, we know in Canada, we do not necessarily have a framework that allows for collection of database information. And the importance of that is in the absence of a framework for collecting data, race-based data, we won't be able to employ a meaningful intersectional analysis as to how a particular initiative or work impacts people of diverse demographics. So today's topic also falls under like this limitation, right? I'm not 100% sure if the panelists would be able to give us disaggregated intersectional analysis of how the school liaison program affects students of diverse background empirically and based on data, but they will be able to share some anecdotal experiences that they have with diverse groups of students and probably parents. So our first speaker is going to be Preet Rai. Preet has been on the board of school trustee for 14 years and just got elected for the 5th term this past October of 2022. A chartered accountant from India, Preet Rai immigrated to the UK in 1992, where he worked for the Scottish government. He then moved to Canada in 1995 and has been working for the government of British Columbia since 1997. Apart from his role as a school trustee, he also serves with various organizations in Abbotsford, including the Canuck Place Campaign Executive Committee for the fundraising of the new Canuck Place Hospice being built in Abbotsford. He also worked with Abbey Fest, where he organizes the volunteers. He's also the chair of the audit committee for the school district. He was previously the chair of the finance committee for the school district. So without further ado, I would welcome Preet Rai to make to give his speech. You're welcome, Preet.
Thank you, Muhi, and thank you, Robin, for organizing this event. And what a great event! I count a lot of people there. So basically, what I will not be speaking for very long, because I'll be speaking from, say, a 10,000, 50,000 level, speaking from what I know about the program, how I maybe feel about it, and also some of the things that I've heard out in the community about the program. So, and I would like to, I would really like to thank the Abbotsford Police Department for being our partners in this. It's been my experience that this program is very good for our district. It is very, the students or the kids who come in contact with these officers, most of the time, I would say 100% of the time, do positive experiences with them. So I got a little, so to me, from that high level point of view, I think we have, there's 5 goals that we look at the lens here. So the first one is that this program provides us with law enforcement and police services to the school. This means that if something happens, there's a criminal incident involving students, the police, we contact the police liaison officers and they look into that. If there's a crisis response, some traumatic incident happens, death of a student in the community, or a tragic incident like that, the police liaison officers, amongst other people, do come in to help as well. They provide, I think one of their major goals is to provide prevention services through positive relationships. And I can give you a few examples of that. Previously, we used to have presentation at the board level from police liaison officers. It hasn't happened in the last few years, and you know what? It's because of, I think, COVID reasons. We would like to have them come again and give us an update on how things are going with them in the near future. But there's been so many positive incidents that I hear with the liaison officers, and the ones that come to mind is, for the longest time we've been having, and I'll just go like Muhi was saying about maybe trying to talk about a community. So I'll just maybe bring in the Indo-Canadian community in there. And I go to a lot of temples. I go to the gurdwaras, to the temples in Abbotsford, and I hear a lot about what's going on in the community, in the Indo-Canadian community, as well as the larger community. But I do hear once in a while about how somebody has been impacted by the police liaison officers and how they have prevented some things by their being positively at assemblies or other places where they come and present, and as well as where they present to individual classes. And they also, once the school district feels that they have an issue with a student, sometimes ARJA does come in once quite a lot, but also police liaison officers comes in there, and with their positive sort of a big brother, big sister relationship, they are very, very helpful. And I don't have the statistics for that. Maybe Kevin from the police and David, who's going to represent our district more, might have more than I do. But I do feel that over the last 5, 7, 10 years, the gang violence, let's take gang violence, has decreased in the subset of the Indo-Canadian community. Because when I go to the temples, it used to be quite prominently talked about at that time, and now it's less talked about it. So one of the reasons, there'll be so many other things that are getting into the prevention of that, but one of the reasons I've heard is also about the police liaison officers coming to the schools. Another thing that they do provide safe environment, safe schools environment in our schools. They come and visit schools. I think they only, and you can correct me afterwards, but I think it's only in the middle schools and the high schools now, because like everywhere else, staffing is short. It's just not with the police, it's with everybody. Staffing is so short. I believe a couple of years ago, there were 7 liaison officers, and now we're down to 4, and maybe another one getting hired. So hopefully we'll get back to 7 pretty quick. But it is hard for people people to get hired right now. They also develop and implement classes in law-related education. This used to happen quite a lot in the previous years, but I think with the lack of staff, it's a little bit less, but I'm sure it will gain momentum again. Another one is to promote the profession of policing as a positive role model, so that if somebody's interested to be a police officer down the road, they can talk to the police liaison officers. And a few years ago, there used to be a junior police academy. It's been on hold because of COVID, I think, but I hope that it gets retooled, redone, so that the positive impact on the kids are happening. I think I'll leave it at that. And once there's any questions afterwards, we'll probably answer them as well. Thank you, Mohit. Thank you, Robin, for giving me the opportunity to speak for a bit. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Preet. Now I'll pass it to either Robin or Amy to introduce the second speaker.
Yeah, that would be me. So I'm going to introduce David DeWitt. David has been a principal in the Abbotsford School District for the last 17 years as a high school administrator, and now as a district principal. He's been the principal at Bakerview Center for Learning, working with some of our most vulnerable learners, as well as principal at Rickhanson Secondary and W.J. Mowat Secondary. In his current role as District Principal of Learning Support Services, or Safe Schools, he is the liaison between the school district and the Abbotsford Police Department, the School Liaison Officers. And he's kind of a superhero because he stepped in on like Monday. I think he agrees to be part of this panel. So we're very thankful to have him here speaking about his experience with this program.
Great, thanks, Robin. I appreciate being called the superhero. Hopefully people still feel that way at the end. I think Robin covered a bit of my bio there and with a great introduction. So I am currently, as she said, a district principal of Learning Support Services, and I have the Safe Schools portfolio. The Safe Schools portfolio includes things like crisis response, mental health, threat assessments, social emotional learning, equity, and liaison with community partners. One of those, as Robin mentioned, is our youth liaison officers, but that also includes child and youth mental health, Abbotsford restorative justice, alternatives to suspension, etc. This is actually my 24th year in education. I started in North Van as a teacher and then as a vice principal, working at an alternate school there. I then came out to Abbotsford and started as principal at Abbotsford Continuing Education, or ACE, as some of you may have known it, which then transitioned into being the Bakerview Center for Learning. Overall at ACE and Bakerview, I spent 8 years, and then was at Rickhanson as a principal for 5 years, and then W.J. Mowat as a principal for 2 years before coming into this role. Of my 24 years in education, I have 15 years of experience working in alternate education with some of our community's most vulnerable youth. And I've had the benefit of working with our liaison officers from both the RCMP in North Van as well as the Abbotsford Police Department in our community, which is basically just a long way of saying I've worked extensively in education and in partnership with liaison officers. And the way I see it, the foundational purpose of the Youth Liaison program is really education and relationship based. So we invite them in to be part of our community. And I to many degrees subscribe to that old adage that it takes a village to raise a child. And for some kids, that village might be their family, a teacher, a coach, and a neighbor. But depending on the needs of that individual kid, sometimes it takes a lot larger community for that support. And especially some of our more vulnerable kids. It might take someone from Child and Youth Mental Health, the Foundry, Archway, Impact, SACRO, ARJA, YMCA, and our Youth Liaison Officers. If you look at the Middle Years Developmental Index and the Youth Developmental Index, which are two surveys our district uses to survey overall mental health and well-being of our students, one of the protective factors that they talk a lot about in there is the number of important adults that a kid has at school. So we know healthy relationships with a healthy adult is a protective factor for our kids, and many of our vulnerable kids would probably indicate that our Youth Liaison Officers are one of the healthy adults they've been able to connect with. I know this conversation is based, or the reason for it is the letter that came out from the Human Rights Commissioner. And that Human Rights Commissioner in it referenced a US study. And I want to put out that the US is not part of our community. It's not part of our village, and it doesn't really feel right to be compared to them. Our community is different from our neighboring communities. The relationship that we have with our Abbotsford Police Department is going to be different from the relationship other communities have with their liaison officers and their programs. The Human Rights Commissioner did get one thing right, and that is that there's not enough data in Canada. But this isn't a reason to cancel a program. This is a reason to ask a question. What do we need to measure? What are the questions we need to ask if we want to effectively assess this? Should we look critically at the programs we offer? Yeah, 100%. But a blanket response is not the right answer. And so to be an integral member of any community, you have to have a relationship with that community. And that's where the work really begins with our Youth Liaison Officers. And it's building a bridge between the school and the police. And what I want people to recognize is that it's about prevention and not reaction. So as an administrator in a building, whether it was at Bakerview, whether it was at Rick Hansen, whether it was at WJ Mowat, my job was to oversee student discipline, along with my admin team, the teachers, and the support staff in the school. That's not the police officer's job. I don't want them to come into school and do that, and they don't want to come in and do that. That's not what our expectation of them in our schools is. Yes, sure, if a major crime has occurred, we're going to need the police assistance in that, but we don't want assistance in terms of policing our schools, and that's not the role our Youth Liaison Officers want to take or that they play. I think of incidents where somebody's maybe brought a small quantity of drugs into school. Our response was intervention and support for that kid, not police action. So we would look at how do we involve our community? How do we involve our village to support those kids? Is it the YMCA Alternatives to Suspension program? Is it Impact? Is it support through the Foundry? What do we need to support this kid to make positive choices in their life? And so then you ask, well, what does prevention actually look like then if police are in your schools? It means it's active participation in our school community, that it's focused on building relationships with the students in our schools. And so how does that manifest itself? Well, that's participating in things like dry grad, in prom, in school dances when we used to have them, in convocation, in staff versus student games, in pep rallies, in school-wide celebrations. That's where kids begin to see our Youth Liaison Officers in a different light and where they begin to build those relationships. They also play an education piece, which I think is really important. They do presentations on self-relationships, safe relationships, gang talk, the fentanyl crisis, no means no. They come in and present in our law classes. And so they do a variety of education work in partnership with us. And I think, many people have asked about that data and, well, I don't come with, quantitative data that I can share with you right now. What I can come and share is that qualitative piece. And so how do you know the relationships are working? It's because a student in crisis, when they come to school, asks to speak to the liaison officer by name. They know there's someone they can go to for help. And to me as a parent, not only as a principal of a school and educator in the school, but as a parent in the school district, I ask myself, like, if my kid needs help, do I want them to be able to go to a police officer that they can trust? And the answer is yes. And that's what our youth liaison officers are about, is about establishing those relationships so kids can go to somebody that they trust when they need help. You know, it wasn't too long ago, I was just at a middle school, and I was coming in the building with 2 police officers, and the kids were high-fiving the police officers, high-fiving our youth liaison officers. They were happy to see them. They were part of our community. The kids recognized them there. They must have had 25 kids high-five them. I got none. So you can see that they are an important figure in the school, that they've taken the time to build those relationships in the school with the kids that are there, and the kids see them as part of that school community. There's also other ways that our youth liaison officers find opportunities to connect with kids. It may be participating in Indigenous canoe journeys. I've seen a youth liaison officer drive on their own time to a graduation ceremony for a student who was leaving a treatment center in the Okanagan. Because of that relationship they had with that kid and how important it was for them to be there to support that kid. They'll give a kid a ride home who's afraid they're going to get beat up after school. They'll go out to a kid's house to connect with them when a kid hasn't been at school for a while and wonder how they can re-engage them. They coach our school teams, and they're an integral part of our school. There are other aspects that we ask them to be part of. Our violent threat risk assessment process involves a multidimensional approach with community partners, and our liaison officers are partners in assessing the risk to the student and to others in our community. And they also help us determine appropriate interventions in those cases. And then, you know, the final and smallest part of their role in our schools is actually the policing part. So if a significant criminal element involving students has taken place that requires police involvement, we're going to invite our liaison officers in. But the real advantage is that the officer is well aware of community supports for youth and the different interventions available for them, and often has a relationship with that kid. So they're a supportive individual that's known to our students and to our community. And that connection also allows for a quicker response time and quicker interventions for that student in need. And, you know, there are areas for improvement. I mean, there's areas for improvement in any program. I think we need more officers to meet the needs of our schools. I would like to see more liaison officers in schools. I would like to see longer cycles on the job. I think at one time, the cycle for a youth liaison officer was 3 years in a school. I think it is up to 5 years now, but we have to recognize that relationships take time. And I think there's an advantage to having a longer cycle where an officer is part of the youth liaison program. I know the Human Rights Commissioner mentioned concerns about the BIPOC community and community engagement, and that we don't have data in this regard. And so I think it's probably important that we gather data if that's an area of concern, that's something we take a look at. But there's always areas that we can improve on, and it's important that we ask those questions. It's part of any good improvement cycle. In my 24 years in education, my experience has been that they're a huge asset to schools, to kids in our communities. I thought the other day, after we sort of initially met with panel members, I wondered how many liaison officers have I actually worked with over the years, and I lost count at 17. And, you know, to a T, they've been amazing individuals that have made meaningful contributions to our school communities. And most important, I've seen the profound difference that they've made in kids' lives. So.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, David, for sharing your experience and perspective on the topic. Now we'll just transition into the third and last speaker, last but not the least, And I will ask Amy to introduce Kevin Murray.
I think Amy has actually stepped out for a moment. She had to go deal with something, but I have Kevin's bio on hand, so I'm able to introduce him as well. Kevin's been part of the police department for 23 years. He is the officer in charge of the Operations Support Branch, which includes the Youth Squad, which are the school liaisons. He was also a Youth Squad officer for 6 years himself, from 2004 to 2010. And just today, the Abbotsford Police Department's Instagram did a profile on him. So we also learned that he doesn't like spiders and he liked traveling to Tahiti. That was his favorite place. So got a little bit more information on you out of that one. So welcome to Kevin.
Thank you. I don't know if there's a filter on my camera or not. I may look like I don't have a lot of hair to those watching. That's not true. The reason I was asked to do this is because, of course, my previous school liaison role and my current role as a supervisor for school liaison. And I also know that one of the purposes was to address the fact that there was this human rights letter that cited the concerns that members of our BIPOC community would have about police being in the schools. And I'm certainly alive to that. So I read her letter intently, and then I tried to do some follow-up because she cited, of course, American studies. And some of those American studies were quite enlightening to me about the differences, as Dave pointed out, between Canada and the United States. And some of their studies that I happened to read nerdily, that a lot of the issues that they were having revolved around entrenched school liaison officers embedded in the schools that effectively did roving patrols. And we don't do anything like that. And I don't know of any school district in Canada that operates like that. But if this is going to be an Abbotsford-centric discussion, then we should really address how this applies to Abbotsford. And it doesn't apply at all to Abbotsford. One of the issues cited in one of the studies, Montez 2020, in recent years, scholars have suggested that the shift towards police presence as a regular part of the school environment has resulted in the criminalization of a wide array of behaviors that would have traditionally been considered youth misconduct handled by educators rather than police officers. As Dave rightly pointed out, it's the school's purview to conduct the vast majority of those types of interactions. And unlike every other jurisdiction in the United States, and as you know, the United States have state statutes for crime and youth engagement and school programs, whereas Canada has one giant thing, the Youth Criminal Justice Act, that really impacts the manner in which police would conduct themselves in the enforcement mechanisms. The YCGA is replete with legislative provisions that speak to how the police should only be proceeding with an arrest as a last resort. And I can tell you that there has been although I can't give you the exact stats because of course I don't have them in front of me, but I was reviewing them earlier this week and there was a marked decline. There's been a marked decline for several years actually of the number of arrests of youth generally, notwithstanding specifically within the school forum. And that's been a trend that has been a positive trend for many, many years. And that's part and parcel because of our relationship with the school and because of federal law that mandates that we look at other options before we go down the dark road of effecting an arrest. To the commissioner's note that there is a dearth of studies in Canada on the issue of how the school liaison program works. I was just reading a report from the University of the Fraser Valley by Cohen, Osterberg, and Lee, and it's titled Assessing the Effectiveness and Efficiency of School Liaison Officers in British Columbia, a qualitative study of school liaison officers and school district administrators. And I would encourage anyone who's interested, it's an excellent read because it talks about and mentions previous studies, including an Argyle study, which was done for the Vancouver School Board in March 2021, and they just made a couple of interesting comments about it. And I thought it would be important as we discuss the nuances of what the Human Rights Commissioner was talking about and how that could apply when we think about the impact that the police are having in our schools. So they've noted that in the past 20 years, studies have reported expected, null, and opposite effects of school liaisons in schools for a variety of outcomes, including levels of crime, perceptions of safety, discipline, and arrest. And then it notes 6 other American-based studies that reflect that. So one of the acknowledgements from this UFV paper clearly denotes that the jury is still out on the effectiveness, the pros and cons of police in schools. They note anecdotally that the preponderance of evidence suggests that it's positive, but they do recognize that marginalized communities have a less favorable view of the police. They did a drill down on this less favorable aspects of the Argyle report that spoke to percentages of populations that had a negative view of the police. And when they drilled down into the sample sizes of a school district of 50,000 students, 1,500 of them participated in the Argyle study. And because they did it over COVID, it all had to be via Zoom, and they were really struggling to get participants and engagement and build the relationships. And Argyle, quite frankly, it concedes that those were some of the limitations in their study. And when I was reviewing how the Argyle study was interpreted by the UFV study, one of the notable things was when they were talking about the percentages of the BIPOC community, in particular, Black and Indigenous youth who were canvassed in the Argyle study. It turns out that of the 1,500, 20 identified themselves as Black and 34 identified themselves as Indigenous. And as the UFV report notes, without diminishing the lived experiences of these students, the sample size puts into question the generalizability of the findings or how to use the results for policy development or decisions. So the only reason I bring that up is, of course, when we have this conversation, we need to be guarded against generalizations and the limitations that individual studies can have, because a study that says 60% of Black students have an adverse view of police, when unfortunately we're only getting 20 Black students to engage in the study, it is challenging to interpret that as being the vast majority of Black students in the Vancouver School District have an adverse feeling or perception about the police. So I won't go further into the study aspect of it. I just think it's important as we move forward, if this is going to be contextual based, especially as it means to Abbotsford, that we at least consider what the academics have said on these topics already, and some of those things about being guarded about generalizing information in a study. The second thing I just want to talk about here is, well, why are the Abbotsford, why do we care one way or another about going into the schools? And it's quite simple. We're interested in building trusting relationships with kids. Everybody knows that in the formative years of a youth, they develop a sense of themselves and a sense of how they interact with the world. I would find it remarkably hard to believe that an individual can go their entire life without having some kind of interaction with a police officer. As much as you might want to avoid them, we're everywhere. So it can be hard to avoid us completely, much like might you try. So why is it important for us to build and nurture those relationships? Is so we have individuals who grow up trusting the police. And I readily concede that there would be individuals, marginalized community members, who have had negative experiences with the police outside of school. They are at home, dad's being arrested for something, family members being arrested for something, there is commotion in the house. I can fully agree that that would be highly traumatic for a youth to witness that, regardless of background. For anybody, that would be traumatic. But I recognize, in particular, with respect to the deep-seated mistrust that has occurred, especially with our Indigenous folk, how that could be perceived negatively. And I'm certainly alive to that. I just wanted to share just a personal anecdote, how when I was a school liaison officer, most of my time was spent with the super high risk kids. Most of them were sexually assaulted at a young age. Most of them were girls that I worked with, and a good chunk of them, percentage-wise, were Indigenous. And it took a long time to build relationships of trust with many of these girls, because I was a cop and because they had had bad experiences with cops before. And in fact, I can tell you anecdotally, every single one of them had a bad experience with the cops, because the cops had come through orders from MCFD to remove them from the home. So they all had bad experiences because a uniformed cop came and picked them up and took them away from mom or dad, because MCFD and or the police, I'm not laying blame here, because the home was deemed unsafe or whatever the circumstances were, and it was a harrowing experience for them to deal with. So it took a long time for these kids to trust a cop, even though I was a different cop. And these two girls in particular were sexually exploited by an older male for years. These girls would bounce from foster home to foster home. They lacked identity. They lacked connection to their to any type of culture. Their peer group was a disaster. They were still connected to school, and I credit our school administrators. And Dave, I've worked closely for many years. He was so switched on and so compassionate in dealing with these kids. No wonder he was called the Superman earlier. In any event, eventually these two kids, we were able to, I felt like I was the sea against their rocky cliff, and over time, you just erode the heck out of it until those barriers break down. And we were able to successfully prosecute an adult male who had been sexually exploiting them for years, and take them through the court system and get this guy time in custody. And it was very rewarding for those girls in particular to go through a system and have to trust not only the school, but the police, but Crown Counsel, and then the daunting task of having to testify. And it's only because those relationships were built over the course of several years, as Dave alluded to, why it's so important to have a multi-year term as a school liaison officer. If you were in and out of there in a year, good luck, you would never have any success in achieving any of these outcomes. Just to further that, with respect to why these relationships are so important, it turns out, just by sheer fluke, after my 6 years as a school liaison officer, they bumped me over to run the domestic violence unit. And wouldn't you know it, many of these kids who came from super vulnerable, abusive backgrounds ended up following in, unfortunately, their parents' footsteps and became abused young adults themselves, and landed back in my lap in the domestic violence unit. And fortunately, because we had built these rapports over many years before, they felt comfortable as young adults to come forward to the police. And I can tell you, this last year, we had that event that Sergeant Paul Walker put on, the Movie in the Park event. And there must have been, I don't know, half a dozen at least of young adults with whom I've had years worth of experience with as a school liaison officer. And they came to the park with their kids and were interacting, not just with me, but with other uniformed cops in the park. There is not a chance that any of those kids would have ever contemplated that in their future, they would purposely go and seek out cops at an event because of their previous experience at that very young age. So having officers entrenched in the schools to provide that relationship building, that nurturing, that modicum of safety, that we could end up being the one peer that or that one adult in their life that helps make that difference for them in a real world way. That then it comes full circle, and they bring their kids to interact with police, whereas before they would bristle at the notion of even engaging with the police. Here they were bringing their kids now to the police. So I thought that was a tremendous success, and that shows you the success of this program. Why is it important to have specific cops in schools? I think it's because Schools are a microcosm of society. So what happens in school happens in the greater society. Well, in greater society, when an individual is the victim of a sex crime or something, you have specialized officers who deal with it. If it's a domestic violence matter, you have specialized officers. We have specialized officers all over the place. But when it comes to school liaison officers, they too have to be specialized because it's a very unique group, kids, in order to engage with. If we were to, God forbid, contemplate the elimination of a school liaison program, what you would end up having is that in the event there's a criminal event happening at a school, they phone 911 and it's a roll of dice, whatever officer you get there. I'm pleased to know that I'm encouraged by the fact that we hire awesome officers here. So it's not like you're rolling like, oh my God, it's going to be a nightmare. But what you might end up with is someone who might not be able to engage with the kids in the same way, who won't have any of the history of the parties involved. As long as you have school liaison officers involved, they are intimately aware of the individuals at play. They're aware of the involved in the relationships between individuals. They have relationships with the school principals, with the teachers, so that they can collaborate more effectively than just Joe Cop off the street who's thrust into a criminal investigation at a school, who doesn't know any of the parties. And at that young age where intervention is most important and setting the tone right off the bat about the individuals that in which the police need to engage with as being a safe space to come and engage with, and that the situation will be resolved satisfactorily to them. You want that consistency, and that consistency comes from entrenched school liaison officers who know what's going on. Our liaison officers are not roving the halls with rifles, patrolling, looking for trouble. We are there engaging with the staff, engaging with the students to the extent that the schools want us, and then we go. And that's the beauty of how the system has worked with us, and why the system continues to reflect well when you talk to parents and teachers alike about why the Abbotsford model, so to speak, has worked well. There is no set program. The Abbotsford Police doesn't do the DARE program or anything like that. We don't ascribe to a particular training module. We are very responsive to the requests and needs of school counselors and teachers about specific areas or issues that address specific schools, and have those very attuned and attenuated members attend those specific schools where they already know the lay of the land and can speak intelligently and compassionately and get the kids to really register and resonate with them because they've already built that trust level. Lastly, I absolutely agree, and I can concede that there were many anecdotal comments made in many of the studies that the uniform and police presence can cause an adverse and anxious reaction, and that's the very thing that we want to avoid happening. But it would be better for us to be in these schools in a non-confrontational way, so that people don't grow up thinking the only time you interact with police is when you're getting in trouble. Au contraire, we want it to be that when you interact with police, it's for positive reasons. It's for safety building reasons. And where can that education come from? It comes from being in the schools, so that when you have an interaction with police later in life, you're not entirely freaking out that it's going to go sideways, because you've grown up in an environment where having police in the school as being someone who as a support mechanism can then help you in your future. And connections you make with those kids at the school-based level can go on for very many years. Look, I've been out of school liaison office for like almost 15 years, and they still, 11 years, not that old, 11 years, and I still get calls and contact from many of the kids that I worked with back then. So I will leave it there for now.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kevin. I can literally sense your passion for the topic and how your proximity to the topic actually inform it in a way that is meaningful. And thank you for the three of you. You provide a unique perspective to this. For those who joined a little bit late, just to give you a high-level highlights of the conversation, I think Preet Rai was making a good case on how the school liaison program is having a positive impact, especially within the Indo-Canadian community, particularly when it comes to gang-related activities. David, you touched on one of the things that I really wanted to explore deeper about having a whole community-based approach to dealing with the students and criminal behavior as well. And this is interesting to me because I'm also observing that the village that you're talking about, the community partners that can get involved in making the lives of students easier, convenient, and comfortable. Some of the programs are actually facing some funding challenges. And I was wondering if this ecosystem is important. What would be some of the opportunities to collaboratively and collectively work in sustaining this partnership, because it is really important for the work, right? So there is no need for even competition in this, because we know each partner actually is important. And I know in the audience, there are people who are deeply touched by this. They might have the chance also to ask questions about that. And Kevin, you made a very important point about some studies that have tried to challenge the effectiveness of the school liaison officers program, but you showed some of the limitation of those studies. Maybe some of them are based on the US, some of them are not based on representative samples. You mentioned, for example, the study that was only based on 20 Black participants in the study, which might not lead to an accurate generalization of the outcome. But I think I'm not pushing back, but I just want to say, regardless, we also need to design research studies that can actually show us how this program is serving students of diverse background. We cannot just say this is not this study has not gone enough, but we need to design ones that can really go enough and prove that the program is serving all students inclusively. I'm just trying to provoke people to some of the questions that we might also see here. But I share, before we transition into Q&A session, yesterday I shared a quick reflection with the organizing committee. I said, working with an underfunded program like mine is not fun, right? It's not fun, especially when we want to recruit speakers for panel events like this, because first, we don't have that financial incentives to recruit speakers. Secondly, there's concerns around psychological safety for those who choose to be part of panel events. And also there is, it is sometimes really hard to sustain a politically correct tone. And when panelists or speakers fail to maintain that politically correct tone, there are consequences. Sometimes there are disciplinary consequences, but sometimes there are professional and career consequences for people who fail to adhere to political correctness. And also for racialized individuals who want to participate in panel events, sometimes there's just deep feeling of imposter syndromes, because sometimes it is really hard for us to believe that our lived experience can amount to an expertise on a given topic. So all these concerns is to say, when we finally recruit speakers to the panel event, we actually manage to recruit those who are brave, courageous, empathetic and have the right motive actually to engage, because there's no clear incentives, personal incentives for them to participate. So I want our audience to appreciate these three people who just share their experience and their perspective. They're courageous. They have the right motive to be here. This is not a call to pull punches, right? But it's a call for us to be really thoughtful with the questions, asking intelligence questions, but those questions that are considerate and also takes into consideration the conditions under which people might choose or become reluctant to come and speak. With that, I will, we're gonna have probably 3 different types or categorization of receiving the question. Speaking from experience, sometimes it takes a few minutes from when the speakers stopped speaking and when the content trickled down to the audience. So I would invite anyone from the planning committee, if you have a question, please feel free to ask. And then, because we want this session to be really engaging, I would give priority for people who put their hands up to ask, and after that, we will go to the question from the chat box. So if there is any person from the planning committee with a questions, feel free to ask. I see the good thing also, the Teams gives me the order of the hands raised. So I see Celine's hands first. So Celine, you're welcome.
Celine, we can't hear you.
We can hear you.
Still can't hear you, Celine.
Celine, maybe I can't hear you. Maybe try to speak without the headphone. I saw another hand earlier, but it disappeared. So I will go to Jessica.
Celine, we still
sorry.
can't hear you.
Can you hear me? This is Jessica.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. I'm very sorry I was late. I didn't have Microsoft Teams and I thought it was Zoom. Could you quickly explain who each of the presenters are, just really quick? I know who Kevin Murray is, but maybe that would benefit some other people that were late, like I was.
The other speaker is Preet Rai and David DeWitt. And I think they're all spotlighted in the screen. Do you have a question, or that's it for you, Jessica?
That was it. I just thought, well, we wait for people to come up with questions. And I'm sorry, what is your role? What do you do? And what I missed all of that.
This is a question for the panelists or for me as a facilitator?
For you as a facilitator, thank you.
Oh, and I work for Archery Community Services. I oversee 3 different programs. The first one is diversity education that works with the Fraser Valley Human Dignity Coalition, which is hosting this event. And the second program is Abbotsford Local Immigration Partnership and the Refugee Readiness Team. Thank you, Jessica. I will go to Janet, then Megan, and then Farron Betchers. I hope I did not butcher your name. So in this order.
Hi, can you hear me? Hi, thanks
Yes.
so much. Dave DeWitt probably recognizes my name. I do work at Bakerview Center for Learning, one of the high-risk schools in Abbotsford. I'm a teacher there. I've worked there since 2015, and I worked at Bateman before that. Two very different schools. I have used the police liaison officers multiple times, obviously at Bakerview, but I also used them at Bateman. And the one nice thing that I found was that I would have students come up to me, ask me a question to go ask the liaison officer if they were too shy. At Bateman one time, I had a student say, "Hey, there's a creeper here. That car comes here every day and students go up to it and he's scary. I know him, he's a creeper." So I asked the student to give me the license plate number and I slipped it to the liaison officer, and lo and behold, by next week, the car was no longer there. It was done quietly, no ruffling of feathers. Nobody was the wiser who did it. And it was wonderful. As a parent, I've used liaison officers as well. So what I would like to encourage is any parents that have concerns is to go up to your liaison officer at your school, wherever your child goes, and ask them questions. And what I love is our liaison officer, Constable Shane Dewick, comes to our school regularly, as they do to all the other, whatever schools they're assigned to. And he doesn't come in his uniform all the time. He joins into the school population. He's part of the class. He's part of the family and joins in whatever we do. Kids go up and ask him random questions. And our kids are rough. When they ask questions, they really are blunt. And it's like no other school ever. And when you ask them questions back, they give you the answer. So you better make sure you want that answer before you ask the question. And, you know, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else but at Bakerview, because we use liaison officers, we use Archway, we use Foundry. It's a wraparound care that the entire province really needs to use. And to encourage a conversation with everybody is so important. So just ask your liaison officer at your schools what they do, what their role is. Don't be shy, because they're so important. They're not there to arrest people. They're there to be community and help. They're not nothing else, just simple. Everybody makes it too complicated. And when US information and data gets involved, it gets kerfluffled and mixed up, and we forget the students, because anywhere in this data, did anybody talk to the students? We always forget to talk to the students. They'll give you honest answers. Thank you very much, by the way.
Thank you.
I'm back.
So first, Preet, David, Kevin, do you want to? I'm not sure if that is a question, but it was just a comment, a great comment there. So if you want to just say something, feel free. Otherwise, we'll go to the second person who is going to ask. Megan, go ahead.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you for this amazing panel. It's been so much rich information. The question I have is how we continue this momentum and keep pushing this forward. I'm hearing a lot of concerns with what the Human Rights Commissioner report has stated. So I'm wondering if we as a community have a plan to push back or to share some of our concerns with her recommendations to her directly or her office directly.
So I can comment to the extent that there is ongoing high-level collaboration between the school district and the police department. In fact, Dave and I are going to be meeting, I think it's next week. We have to develop a strategy because the school board meeting, and I'm not stepping on Preet's toes, I hope. I know that at the police board meeting there was a discussion on in light of the revelations made by the Human Rights Commissioner and the Human Rights Commissioner's concerns, should we at least undertake a review and see how we can improve the program? And there isn't a person that wouldn't disagree that it's time for a review. Make sure we're on the right path, and make sure that we attenuate our responses and our collaboration appropriately given the Human Rights Commissioner's concerns. So that work is being undertaken this month and beyond.
Megan, do you have a follow-up question, or are you satisfied with the answer?
No. Well, thank you.
Good.
And this is Preet here from the school board sort of perspective. There is nothing but great respect for the school board, for the liaison program. And we're so happy that this is going on. And also, we're looking forward to it is a very good program, but it can be made better. And once David and Kevin sort of, we would love to see that result and maybe enhance it, make it better. Definitely.
Thanks, Preet. I will go to Fran Bachers.
Hi, sorry, I have a little light here. I have a little one, and he's sleeping right now. So yeah, Fehrenbacher is my last name. Here with my partner. Yeah, thank you for putting this panel together. It's really insightful. I would like to kind of push back on the last comment and say that we don't actually have uniform momentum and agreement here that the Human Rights Commission letter was inappropriate. I do think that there was wisdom in that, and I would like to see you know, people follow up on that. I think a lot of the data that we heard, or a lot of the stories that we heard from the speakers tonight were saying that we don't have data, we don't have data, we don't have data, except for the one study where we did have data, where 60% of Black people were uncomfortable with cops, but then it was immediately written off because it was a low sample size. But the only data that we had did confirm what the commission letter did say. So I'm not saying that, yeah, don't read too much into that, but I'm just saying we don't have universal agreement that that's a bad thing here. My question is for Preet, as an administrator of the school system, why, when trying to put together a program that will create relationships with community members, that will foster vulnerable people, are the police the most appropriate organization to approach for that, and not people who are more approachable and more demographic representative of those vulnerable populations, people who are not the law enforcement wing of the criminal justice system. So why are those resources not provided directly to the school system to institute that program, and why are we relying on the police department to do that?
I think that's a I'll say it this way, that's not the correct or that's not what we think. There is so many other programs that are available in the school. There's the SACRO, there's ARJA, there is YMCA. There's so many other programs that is happening in the schools, and we do not go to the police. Like I think David also said that before. Kevin also said that before. Police are not there to enforce anything. They come into the schools on our request, and they are there as a positive role model, just to be positive experiences in the school district. I'll give you an example, and this is from my own personal experience with my kid. This was a time when there were presentations in elementary school. I think he was my son. He was in kindergarten or grade 1, and this is where the policeman, but the police was not very happy. Oh, they were happy. They were having a laugh. So they gave a presentation in the assembly, and next day, me and my wife and the little guy, we went to Walmart, and the same police officer was arresting somebody, putting him under handcuffs. And my son goes up to him and says, "Mr. So-and-so, remember you were there at our school yesterday? You were so good." He's trying to get away from my son because he's in the middle of a police activity. But my son, having a positive experience with the person, was there asking him questions. I had to pull him back. Come on, you can go back, talk to him another day when he's in the school. But so that I think is a very, very positive, that he could go, being in kindergarten or grade 1, and talk to the officer, not realizing what the officer was doing. But that was, I thought that was a great experience for him.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I guess a follow-up question would be that in the example that Kevin shared with the Indigenous young women, why was it that their course of action had to go through a white police officer and not somebody who was more culturally safe for them Why did the school district only provide them with that avenue?
Maybe I can.
Thank you for the work that you did. I'm not questioning the outcome or your motives. I'm just saying there clearly was that intimidation there, and that intimidation was another barrier that they themselves had to overcome instead of having an easier path to being able to find somebody to talk to.
Maybe I can just touch on basis on the original part of your question, and then also kind of touch base on what you mentioned there. So I think it's important to know that our youth liaison officers are not funded by the school district; they're funded by the police department. Just like all our community partners have independent funding. So they are one part of our village, I'll call it. You know, being a school principal, and especially a school principal at Bakerview, but I was in regular contact with liaison officers, with clinicians at Child and Youth Mental Health, with probation officers, with folks at the YMCA Alternatives to Suspension, with ARJA, with all the impact drug and alcohol counselors, we had a family doctor that would come to the school. We had all different kinds of programs and community resources to best support kids. Some kid may have only needed to go to impact for some drug and alcohol counseling. Somebody might have just needed to go to alternatives to suspension. Some kids needed that entire team, and that's what I want people to get have this understanding, is that our youth liaison officers are one part of a bigger system in our schools. They are not the only tool we have. We have many tools in our toolbox. Just like when Kevin talked about supporting those Indigenous students, they would have had an Indigenous support worker at school. They would have had access through our Indigenous department to elders, to other culturally appropriate supports for them. That was one tool that we had for those kids. They would have had a youth care worker at the school. They would have had a teacher and an EA. They would have had all different kinds of advocates and supports. So to think that our only intervention or our only support for those kids in that situation was a police officer, I don't think paints an accurate picture of the work that schools do or the work that our communities do in trying to really support kids with wraparound care.
Yeah, and I'll just follow up with Dave there. I apologize for it. In an interest of time saving, I reduced that story down. But to Dave's point, I worked with a fantastic social worker for those girls who helped ensure that the relationship between me and those girls worked. And the reason why I needed to be involved, quite frankly, is because if it's a criminal investigation, they have to provide statements to me. So in order to get to that point, they had to have trust in me and the process. And it's because of the social worker. It's because of, and they had a great teacher at Bakerview who they really resonated with. And it was because we had other adults who were able to say, no, you can trust this cop. We've dealt with him before on other things. And slowly over time, that relationship is built, not just by me with the girls, but by the other supports who are supporting me, because we all have the same objective: keep these girls safe and arrest this idiot. So in order to get there, it required this effective wraparound approach for this kid. So if it weren't for those other resources, I would not have had success as a standalone between me and those girls. So I apologize for providing that you with that misapprehension that it was just me and these kids and hooray, because that wasn't it.
Well, thank you for that.
Thank you. We'll now go to Sharon Geet.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I want to thank all the speakers for, speaking their truths. I am a bit disappointed that this panel doesn't offer a bit of nuance. It seems very one-sided and defensive for the police liaison program, as opposed to providing a bit of contextualization of how important this report is. So I do agree with the previous speaker. I do feel like this report should not be taken lightly. It is the BC Office of the Human Rights. It is based off of a methodology and a history and a practice that is steeped in human rights. And so I don't think any part of what Kasari Govender has said should be taken lightly. So, you know, I am speaking as somebody who's lived in Abbotsford for more than 30 years, so 32 years. I'm also an educator at the University of the Fraser Valley, so I'm an academic, I'm a critical race theorist, and I have 2 children in middle school in Abbotsford schools. So my pulse is very much to the ground of things that are happening locally in the schools, but at university as well. And so I want to just provide a bit of a contrary example to the points that Preet made and others have made, that, you know, the remarks are positive. They are not all positive, right? And it's really important that when we talk about the experiences of police liaisons, we do talk about trauma and harm as well. And we talk about systemic racism, institutionalized racism, privilege, and power. So I want to ask each of the speakers how, and Kevin, I really actually appreciated your comments because you spoke specifically about Black, Indigenous, racialized people, and you provided actually very tangible kind of examples of things that are being done on the ground in the police liaison programs, which I wasn't aware of, right? So I really appreciated those comments. But I would really like to know how each of the speakers will actually take what was said in the report from a human rights perspective in terms of moving us forward to understanding how power and privilege and systemic racism works in institutions, whether it be policing, whether it be the school board, or whether it be schools. That's a big question, I know, but I really want to know how we can move forward in terms of positive impact from this very important and critically needed report. Thank you.
I can go first there if nobody wants to jump up. And you know, I do appreciate your comments there, and my comments weren't to dismiss the work of the Human Rights Commissioner. That wasn't my intent at all, but it was to make it, I think, bring it back to our community and our experiences within our community. Has it been perfect? No, obviously not. And what the Human Rights Commissioner did say that I do agree with is there needs to be more research done in terms of the impact with our BIPOC community. And to me, that's where I found the value in that report. And that's, you know, one of the things that we have to consider going forward. And Kevin referenced it earlier, is that, you know, the Abbotsford Police Department and the Abbotsford School District are committed to taking a look at our Youth Liaison Officer program. What's working really well and what do we need to improve on? And part of that is how do we capture the voices of our BIPOC community to ensure that they are heard as part of this review and that they become an integral part of it.
And I would just like to echo what David said there as well, is that the report, we are looking at the report, we are talking about it. That is why one of the reasons why David and Kevin are going to look at the program again and give us an opportunity to, like I said before, to enhance the program, make it better, see where we are, I won't use the word lacking, but where we are lacking in what else we can do to make this a better program. That's always the case. That is just not with this program. The school board, the school district, we are always trying to make anything that's going on in our district better than before. We are ideal? No, we are not, but we strive to do better. And I would just say that we are going to look at this report. We have talked about it at our board level a little bit, but we'll wait till we get more information and then take it from there.
Yeah, and from a policing perspective, and I apologize if I came across as being overly critical of her letter. I only take exception with the reliance on what's happening in the state of Georgia or Mississippi and somehow importing that as to what's happening in the province of British Columbia, or more focused to what's happening in Abbotsford. To your question, however, as to what we're going to do, well, the police don't want to be seen as an organization or an institution that causes fear for kids when the whole objective is the exact opposite. So one of the areas that we're going to be exploring is whether or not we do a better job of race-based data tracking, so that we can, when we pull statistics, when we're FOI'd or whatever, we may be able to pull more salient data from it. And truth be told, that has not been a previous practice. And this type of report reinvigorates efforts to advance that. It also stimulates our willingness and drive to collaborate with the school district and potentially UFV or another, like UFV, for example, to see if we can provide and undertake an Abbotsford-centric study, so that we can enhance on and improve upon the UFV, the Argyle study from Vancouver, because as the UFV study, it's a UFV study that was not critical, but highlighted the flaws in the Argyle study. So I completely agree that more study is required, and that's going to require collaboration. It's going to require the application for grant money, and the APD never shies away from applying collaboratively with UFE or other research organizations to get to the root cause of issues, because we want to get to the root cause of issues, and we want this to not be a concern, because we want the community to support the police. The police are the community, and the community are the police. We believe in that. We want to make that happen. We're stronger together as a community, united, and these are the mechanisms by which we can get there. I concede that the format or the entire outline as to how we're going to get there is very much a work in progress. So with the assistance of the school district and colleagues of yours at the university, hopefully we can find a framework forward that can help address and better get more granular with the data to see how we can improve processes moving forward.
Thank you all. To Sharonjit and others in the audience, we actually actively tried to bring Kasari to this panel event, but because of time constraint, she wasn't able to make it. But she really wanted to be part of this, and we are going to bring her in the future events to just balance the perspectives on this topic. So there is plan to just to continue this conversation. Celine, it's finally your turn.
Can I be heard? Can you hear me? Okay, I would like to thank everybody, all the speakers. You did a fantastic job. Thank you, Ray. Thank you, David. And thank you, Kevin. I love your presentation. My question, I put them in the chat, but I will repeat again. The first one is, do you have any BIPOC member among your liaison officers? And which race are they? Are they First Nation, Black? What? Yeah, I just want to know. And the second one is, you know, for immigrant, police has another connotation. It's not the same as in Canada. It's very different. Like for me, even today, when I see a policeman, I get it tight. Because in my country, Africa, it's very different. I mean, you don't get close to these people. So how are you dealing what are the tools you provide to the new immigrant kids, just to give them that peace that they are not here to harm you, but they are here to protect you, or something like that. Because whatever you do, they will be scared of the police. So these are my two questions. Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. So to answer your first question, we currently have only 4 school liaison officers because we're so darn tight for the number of officers we have right now, and none are BIPOC. They're all Caucasian. 1 Caucasian female and 3 Caucasian males. how it works, and there's no, so anytime there is a school liaison position that opens, it opens up to everyone who's eligible. And I don't want to bore you with the eligibility rules at the police department, but when a position opens up, the membership is canvassed as to who would like to go there. And we don't send people there based on any particular demographic feature. It is more about their willingness to work with kids. Now, not everybody wants to work with kids. There are cops at our department who want to do like ERT stuff, like SWAT, high risk stuff. Not for this guy. This guy will go to the school and hang out with kids all day. That sounds safer. That seems like a better thing to do. So it depends on the temperament of the individual, where somebody is in their career. Are they already seconded to another section? So a lot plays into how we get people into the school liaison position. And it quite frankly just hasn't been a situation yet where we've had multiple applicants from the BIPOC community within our own community of visible minorities within the police department seeking a position at the school liaison office. But there's nothing holding them back if they wanted to seek a job there. For your second question with respect to how do we work with those immigrant populations who have this aversion to authority or law enforcement, we have worked collaboratively with Archway. They have a fantastic new immigrant program there that is second to none, quite frankly, in my opinion. And police have often been invited to attend there to provide new immigrants with the first friendly face of police to try and explain how it's different. We rely heavily on the schools when we're coming in to do stranger danger talk or just generalized police are friendly kind of talks that we do at the schools to really be in the school environment and try and really engage with the kids. And you know, it doesn't happen overnight. As my story indicated, this can take years and years. So over time, over many years, if we expose them to the friendly atmosphere of police in friendly engagement at school, over time, those sentiments about aversion and apprehension towards police, we anticipate, we hope, will dissipate over time. Again, there's been no study per se on any element of that, but that is our current strategy for trying to help that. We just are trying to be as welcoming as we can, and upon invitation by the schools. If they're alive to a particular subsect in a particular class, or we had recent influx of immigrants, say from Ukraine or from somewhere in Africa, and they're now in the school, and they recognize that this may be a good opportunity to do some rapport building, we're over there at the request of the school to help make that happen and make that transition better.
But there is one thing you said that I think in the previous with the previous speakers, I heard a word that you want to build a rapport with these kids. But for the BIPOC community, they need to see themselves as well within these officers. So how are you going to build that connection without them having anybody representing them, somebody they can connect to, ask questions, somebody who has the same experience as they had or they're having? For me, something is missing there. So you have to try to have someone there to be the representation of these BIPOC people, somebody they can trust and connect with. I think so. Otherwise, there is kind of discrimination, and I mean, it's, yeah, I just want to put it out there. So if you have the opportunity, if you need, you can put this ad in different communities, in the BIPOC communities, to be able to recruit these people. Because if I have never seen such ad, I do a lot of work with the community and with other organizations, BIPOC communities. So if you have such ad, just, you can reach the community Ashway, and then they can send it to me, because we need these people to be included as well in everything you do.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more, Celine.
Thank you.
We are aggressively trying to recruit members to increase our diversity. So if you have some special connection with individuals that you think might be suitable to be police officers, hey, have them go to the Abbotsford Police website. You can email me personally and we can talk offline about that. We would be all over that, because we are definitely committed to increasing the diversity in our organization.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. It's great to know that like diversity of the school liaison officer is a priority and is seen as a value, but also that is not enough. You need to have there is a need for targeted recruitment, and I think based on the ecosystem that David talked about earlier, they can also help with part to reach individuals, right? So even with minor tweaking in the job description, when you say things like individuals are highly encouraged to apply for this position, that itself is a great recruitment tool, right? It creates an incentive for a person to take that extra step to apply for the position. It's not easy to recruit from a demographic that is historically and systemically marginalized. So I think Celine is making a great point there. But thank you for just carefully answering and considering that point. I will go to Jessica Peters.
Hi.
Hi. Yes, we can hear you, Jessica.
A dear friend who's from Syria, and she's been in Canada for more than 30 years, and she still feels violently ill when she sees the color of the uniform of the police officers. Can you hear me? Okay, so
Yes.
So I was just saying, I have a friend who's from Syria who, yeah, did you hear that? Okay, sorry, I'm gonna turn my camera off because my Wi-Fi is very slow. I just wanted to say that often from the people that I've interviewed and spoken with who are Indigenous or Black or refugees, they'll often won't fight or flight, but they'll choose freeze, and they will fawn and please the person that they're afraid of because they're so afraid of violence. So how do you get those honest answers from young children if they've had something scary happen at home? How do you know that you're getting the honest answer when the school goes and asks if they're afraid of police? Like how does the school and the staff know that they're getting a true answer from a child who is in a fight or flight or freeze mode? Like, if you understand what I'm saying, like how do we get that data and know that we're not being harmful, even like because they've lied to protect themselves and say, no, I love the police, the police are great, but really they're hurting inside. Like I know that the schools can't be everything for a child, but I'm just wondering if that's taken into account, or if there's, you know, if children are given a written form to like a little check mark thing to answer, or if they're actually interviewed to find out their feelings towards police officers as you go forward and study the program. Just, you know, like that's just what I'm getting at, is that kids aren't always honest or reliable narrators. And I'm a mom of 3 children, so I know this. So yeah, so how do you go about getting that information from them and having it be reliable, and then making these big decisions based on what children think? So that's my question.
I mean, I think it's a good question, Jessica, and I don't know that we've determined, you know, the methodology yet, or how we're going to gather that data, but we're certainly aware of biases in data, and it would be hard, you know, for a teacher to interview a kid and say, do you like teachers or not? what sometimes kids aren't going to want to present an honest answer, just like if a police officer was interviewing a kid and said, do you like police officers? We want to make sure there isn't bias in the way that we're conducting this review. So I'm glad you raised that point because it is an important one. I do, I really appreciate the comments that you've made about your Syrian friend and about Celine talking about her experience. Because I think it does come back to some degree to that importance of building relationships and trust with kids, and how do you first frame a positive experience for kids with the police, and recognizing that some kids come from different countries where the police can't be trusted, and that they don't have those positive experiences. But if you consider removing the youth liaison officers from school, you greatly reduce those opportunities to build those positive relationships, because the work of youth liaison officers is really intentional in terms of building relationships with kids. And so if we completely remove that, what's the avenue to build a relationship? Because in absence of that, I don't know that there is one, but I do, really agree with what you said there about, how do we make sure there isn't bias in terms of the work or the review that we're going to do.
Thank you.
Thank you. I will go to Aiden Parks. You're muted, Aiden.
Sorry,
Yes.
I pressed it twice. Just to get out of the way, my name is not Aiden. It's actually my son's account. Somehow it went on my son's account. So my name's Ian. And I'm glad that there's lots of different perspectives that are being provided, because that's exactly what I wanted to offer. Like one of the other people that mentioned about growing up in Abbotsford. I grew up in Abbotsford, went to school in Abbotsford. I don't know if David DeWitt remembers, but I actually went to elementary school with him on the east side. And I mentioned east side because I also went to high school at Abbey because I went there for different sports. So I had an opportunity to get my pulse early on for Abbotsford with regards to knowing different areas of our community and what people offer and how people feel. When I went to the University of the Fraser Valley, in my undergrad, I actually did a study in 1996 on the effectiveness of the Abbotsford Police Liaison Program. Not having that data in front of me, actually one of the things I was surprised about was that I say East and Central and West because we had 3 liaison officers at the time. I was not a police officer. I was a student in university. And the attitude towards police officers on the west side of town, demographically higher South Asian at the time for sure, was that they actually appreciated and liked the police better than the people on the east side. And I grew up on the east side of town. So that's the only reason I make the distinction. I think it's really important that, I've also got 23 years of policing experience. I wanted to get on the job to become a school liaison officer, actually. Different paths took me different ways. But playing basketball with some of those kids and the troubled youth, some of my favorite parts of, being a police officer, for sure. And still being in the Fraser Valley for kids. I'm also an academic. I also teach at the University of the Fraser Valley sessionally. So I still have my pulse on the university. I have 3 children in high school and 1 child in university here locally. And I was born and raised in a multiracial family, which included Black and Indigenous in my primary family. So I'd like to think I have some perspective. And although I'm a police officer, and I see some of the positive attributes of the school liaison officer, I think it's important that I was first and foremost a citizen of Abbotsford. And then when I was doing some research, I saw the benefits of it. And now I've seen 23 years of benefit as well. So awesome perspectives, awesome thoughts about how we can improve. To answer Jessica's question about the study, And Dave, you answered it quite eloquently. You said, if a police officer asks, of course, they're going to give a different question. If a teacher asks, well, I was a university student and I asked the question, and I think I got some pretty, significant answers out of it. So that's 25 years old, the data, but I think it's a framework that can definitely be done to move forward. So thank you. And I'll just, whatever comments, there's no question in there, but.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you so much. We just have about 15 minutes left, so I will go to Robin and Amy if there is questions in the chat box.
There hasn't really been a lot of questions actually coming from the chat box, because Celine put hers in there and then she asked them, and so they were answered. I actually was wondering, because I haven't been in high school in a long time, and I'm kind of wondering, like you said, there was 4 school liaison officers in Abbotsford, and like what percentage of their time is spent liaisoning? Is it a full-time position, or is it like a certain percentage of it? Is it split up in that way, or is that just what they can do?
So 3 of them are full-time liaising. So they're in the schools and they bounce from school. I mean, each of them have like 20 plus schools. It's an enormous volume that they have. And 1 is on a special project. It's called Project SWIFT, which is a tripartite, provincially funded position, collaboration between the Abbotsford Police, MCFD, and Cyrus Center. So 1 member from each of that group forms this team called SWIFT, and they go out and pursue, and they have a caseload of 60. It's run by Shane Duick. So Shane Duick, not only does he have Bakerview, but he also has this daunting task of running this team that have targeted the 60 most high-risk youth in the city and try and get them reconnected to services. And in the very short time they've been in existence, they've already rehoused 6 kids who were homeless, taken 5 to detox because they needed it, have made innumerable positive connections with family members of these individuals and with the police themselves. Like Shane's phone, I know, rings off the hook from these kids now because these kids have developed trust in him. So he liaises, but with a group of kids that aren't well attached to school. So we only have 3 officers that are actually attached to school families, responding to calls and engaging with the school population in Abbotsford.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's I see Ted. Yes, Ted. Okay, you're lucky. I was almost going to. Go ahead, Ted.
Thank you. Thank you to the speakers for offering a very interesting perspective on where the state of the union. I think like the number of speakers said, we do have to take the commissioner's report seriously and really not be on the defense, but really seek improvement. I think that's the attitude we're seeing, and use this as an opportunity to really be better and make it Abbotsford centric, because this is what we're talking about. And it could be all American studies, even Vancouver study, which may not necessarily apply to Abbotsford, because we have a different situation, a very diversified population, and our own inherent issues. It's a chance to maybe get some better and more empirical evidence. Try to, as best we can, in forming the studies and questionnaires to get some real data on how the racialized and marginalized groups may actually feel, even though it looks like we have a working system, and I think what I really appreciated was the wraparound care, is that we have many tools in the community that can be used collectively to treat any variety of problems. And I think that's an advantage that we should definitely continue to take advantage of, because not any one service will solve all our problems, which can be tremendously varied across the board. So, I think, we're really on the right track, but maybe it's time to really get some more empirical evidence, current evidence, even though I think you should hire Ian right away because he looks like he covers all the bases in terms of what he can offer. But take the opportunity to do the study and see what's really happening on the ground to make sure that we really are addressing the problems here in Abbotsford. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ted. I agree.
Thank you, Ted. I think that's it for us. I would give each panelist a minute to just share a closing remark, and that will be it for us. Who would like to go first? Feel free.
I can go first. I just wanted to thank both you, Muhi, and Robin and Amy for convening this panel tonight and facilitating this discussion. I appreciate the community that came out to listen. I hope they developed a greater understanding of our youth liaison officer program and understand. Yes, we come from a position of being very passionate about it. From myself and Preet from the school side, and Kevin from the Abbotsford Police Department, and for being a former youth liaison officer. And we're passionate about it because we care about the kids. We see the impact, the positive impact in the work that it's doing. And I also, want people to know that we are committed to looking at it and looking at ways that we can make a great program even better.
Thank you very much, Muhi and Robin and Amy, for putting this panel together and making this conversation. It was a very good conversation. I learned quite a bit, and especially from both David and Kevin as well, a deeper dive into what the program is all about. So thank you very much, and thank you, Kevin and David, and of course your staff for all the help that you give our kids. Of course, like it's been said before, the letter from the commission, we do take it seriously. It's a good program, but we strive to make it better. And thank you again for giving us the opportunity to speak a little bit. Thank you.
Yeah, basically ditto what Dave and Preet said. I don't have anything more meaningful to add. I appreciate the opportunity. I hope I didn't come across that the Abbotsford Police think they're perfect on this. We're not. We are open to change. We want to aggressively pursue change to make it better in the best interest of our kids and the community. That's it.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin, David, and Preet for trying your best to be objective about this. And thank you, everybody who just is able to make it to today's event. That is really encouraging. There is, we are going to have another panel event on, we have a series on truth and reconciliation that is probably going to be next month. And we're going to share some promotional materials on the event and who the panelists would be. With that, thank you so much and have a restful evening.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Mm-hmm.